going on, guys? Welcome back to Talking About Baseball. And today I have one trade piece for every single team. Not a player they should try to go trade for, but a player that they should probably trade away even if they're a contender. So we're going to start it off with the Diamondbacks and Merrill Kelly. Kelly had a really good year for the D-backs last year, getting over 200 innings pitched with a nice ERA for Arizona. The Diamondbacks are enduring a rebuild, and I highly doubt that Kelly is part of their long-term plans at all considering his age. Kelly is 34, but he could go to any team that could use a pitcher. I think some possible teams for Kelly, he could be traded to the Blue Jays, White Sox, Angels, and Cardinals. The Angels are going to be a very reoccurring team in this video, so just get ready. Up next is the Braves, and they're in an interesting position. They're coming off a way earlier playoff loss than they were hoping for, if I had to guess. And they have a weird position with their rotation with some players going through injuries and some aging players. Huascar Ynoa is going to be my player for the Braves. He hasn't been good since early 2021, and he got injured last year, and he only pitched in 2 games this year, getting charged with 2 losses. I don't know who's going to want him, but I think there is some teams that would be willing to take him off the Braves' hand, and some suitors for Ynoa could be the Rays, Twins, Angels, and Rockies. The next player is the Orioles, and I think he could actually be a hot commodity on the market. Means is another guy coming off of an injury, also playing only 2 games. He won't be back immediately after Tommy John surgery, but he could be a nice young add for many teams. Means did just throw a no-hitter last year in 2021, even if he was using sticky stuff. I'm not sure if Means will get traded, but it would be a good building block for the younger Orioles rotation of the future if they do decide to keep him. Teams that I think will go after him would be the Guardians, Rangers, Phillies, Cubs, and Padres. At this point, Bobby Dahlbeck is getting older, and the Red Sox first baseman is no longer providing that much value anymore, which he really never was anyway. He's already 27, and he hasn't really done anything notable in his career other than be terrible. I don't think the Red Sox will hang on to him because there's just no point in keeping him, and I think they could get some at least okay value in return for a trade. I don't think there will be too many teams that really want him, but I think the Twins and Astros might have some decent interest. Next up is the Cubs, and this is really tough, but I don't think the Cubs have too many players that they plan on trading away, but my pick is Kyle Hendricks. Hendricks is paid about $9 million this year, but then he is a free agent. Hendricks hasn't really been good since 2020, and he's also aging. The Cubs don't really need him after their rotation was absolute fire in the second half after Hendricks was injured and out for the year. I don't know that many teams will want him with his hefty price tag and his not-so-great skills anymore, but I think the Blue Jays, Guardians, Mariners, and Giants would all be interested. The White Sox are yet another interesting one, but I have heard some rumors of this player possibly being dealt, so Lucas Giolito is going to be my pick. Giolito was just simply not good in 2022. The entire White Sox team really just dropped the ball this year. Maybe Tony La Russa wasn't a good decision. Giolito has had some really good years recently from 2019 through 2021, even throwing a no-hitter in 2020. Giolito was the worst pitcher in the league, though, in 2018, allowing the most runs and walks and being a whopping 30% below average for a full year. So he has shown that he can easily bounce back from really bad seasons, and he wasn't so great, but he did return to being poor last year. Giolito really wasn't that bad, but his ERA was almost 5. His strikeout numbers were still pretty good, but worse than they used to be. I'm not sure if the Sox would be willing to trade him after his history of bouncing back, but I think lots of teams would be interested, like the Orioles, Twins, Mariners, Angels, Rangers, Phillies, and Cardinals would all like to take a look at Giolito. This next one is pretty much just a guess, but since the Reds aren't that good, I went with their roster and just chose a player that they might trade because he is good and the Reds aren't good. My player is Lucas Sims. Sims is a pretty good reliever in the Reds system, which isn't really saying much because the Reds aren't good. Sims can close out games or just hold them for any team that needs a reliever. I do think the Reds will get some calls for Sims because the reliever market is very small. The Blue Jays just traded for Eric Swanson, and Edwin Diaz and Rafael Montero were both re-signed. I think some teams that could go for Sims are the Yankees, White Sox, Mariners, Cubs, and Dodgers. The Guardians have been in trade talks for what seems like a while with Zach Plesac. Although this might happen to be a trade that happens with Plesac, my choice for the video is Aaron Savale. Savale has been good in the past, but like current divisional rival Lucas Giolito, he was not very good this year. Savale actually had a similar season to Giolito. Savale's ERA was right around 5 on the year, but his strikeout numbers also aren't good. Savale got injured for the second year in a row, except this time I think he wasn't as successful as a pitcher. I think there is some teams that would like Savale if the Guardians don't want to keep him. I think those teams would be the Red Sox, Angels, Rangers, Braves, Cardinals, and the Rockies. The Rockies are pretty stupid, but I think they could maybe finally make a good decision here. They offered Daniel Bard an extension right before the trade deadline, which once again, stupid. And they didn't trade him at the deadline. Once again, stupid. The Rockies are not a good team, and they spend money stupidly, like Chris Bryant, among many others, which just puts them, like I said in a previous video, puts them up, and then it goes, woo, pew. They don't need him anymore, and they just need to accept the fact that they're idiots and stop spending money like it grows on trees. He is part of a smaller reliever market, and I think with Bard's age, he will get some decent value in return for the Rockies. I think teams interested would be the Guardians, Mariners, Rangers, Phillies, Cardinals, Cubs, and Dodgers. The Tigers have a massive problem. That massive problem is that they have sucked after spending a ton of money last offseason. The Tigers need a lot of help in a lot of different places, but I do think a player they can trade is Spencer Turnbull. Like John Means, who was mentioned earlier, he did throw a no-hitter in 2021, and so did Turnbull. Both against the Mariners, actually. And they both had Tommy John surgery following the event. Turnbull has been pretty good for the Tigers in recent years, but he is playing in a pitcher-friendly park. I do think even after going through injury, he will have some value in the middle of his prime at 30. I think some teams that will go after him will be the Rays, White Sox, Mariners, Angels, Rangers, and Giants, and another pitcher-friendly park in San Francisco. Next up is the Astros, sadly the most recent champs. The Astros have tons of talent on the roster, and I think this choice for the Stros is Jose Urquidy. Urquidy hasn't been bad, but the Astros have been acting like they don't really need him. It was between him and Luis Garcia for this spot, who they also acted like they don't really need. And they really don't, if they bring back Justin Verlander, of course. They have either Garcia or Urquidy, the aforementioned Justin Verlander, Framber Valdez, Christian Javier, and Hunter Brown. I think there will be quite a few teams that could use a pitcher on the younger side in Jose Urquidy, so here are some options. I think the Guardians, Angels, Rangers, Marlins, Cubs, and Padres would like to get Urquidy on their roster. Adalberto Mondesi might actually be a big selling player this offseason. Mondesi is on a Royals team who is, to say the least, a train wreck and a dumpster fire. The Royals are absolutely terrible, and I don't think they need Mondesi with Bobby Witt Jr. coming up. Mondesi has dealt with some really bad injury problems, a lot of them lately. Mondesi is a really good player if used properly. He has some really good speed, but also some really insane power from the shortstop position. Mondesi is going to draw interest from many teams because many teams need a shortstop. Some of these teams may sign a guy like Carlos Correa or Trey Turner in free agency, but Mondesi would be a pretty decent pickup. So here are my teams. I think the Yankees, Twins, Mariners, Braves, Cardinals, Cubs, and maybe Padres would be interested in Mondesi. Next up is the Angels, and my player for them is Jared Walsh. Walsh just hasn't been good for the Angels, even though he did hit for the cycle this year. That's pretty much the only good thing he did. On the surface, he was absolute garbage. He was pretty decent when he was a rookie, but many forget he was an older rookie, so he is currently heading into a year where he turns 30. Walsh is a nice bench bat for a team that needs a right-handed crusher, but he isn't much else. The Angels could keep him and just put him on the bench, but I really don't think he should be a starting first baseman or corner outfielder anymore. He was far below average in multiple aspects while being a full-time first baseman for the Angels. I think there will be some teams with interest, and these teams include the Red Sox, White Sox, Astros, Phillies, Marlins, Cubs, and Rockies. This next one, Dodger fans will definitely disagree with me, but I think it's worth it even after Tyler Anderson leaving. The Dodgers have an absolutely stacked rotation in the majors and in the minors, but I might as well say the player right now. The player that is most likely traded for the Dodgers, in my opinion, is Walker Buehler. You may be asking, why would they sell Walker Buehler? The Dodgers would get so much value from Buehler in the majors and the minors. And I think that it might actually be worth it. Buehler is coming off of an arm surgery, and I don't know how the Dodgers are feeling about it. Buehler was kind of poor in 2022, although that probably did have something to do with his injury, but still. I think the Dodgers would at least explore this option. I think literally every team in the league would want Buehler, but I think the main teams would be the Guardians, Angels, Phillies, and Cardinals. Next up is a weird player in Brian Anderson. And pause it right there. This is Editor Connor. We are not going to talk about Brian Anderson because he just got non-tendered by the Marlins, so on to the next team. This next one is going to be more of a pair, but I don't think both of them are going to be traded, only one of them. The next team is the Brewers, and my two players are Corbin Burnes and Brandon Woodruff. They just traded Hunter Renfroe right before I recorded this video, and it is heavily rumored that one of the two after the Brewers' playoff last season, that one of these two potential aces are going to be traded. The Brewers are definitely declining at this point, and they could get so much value out of one of these pitchers, or even both of them, I guess. Freddie Peralta could also be in this spot. Peralta and Woodruff have dealt with injuries in the past, along with Freddie just last year. Burnes has pitched at a Cy Young level the last 2 years, even winning it last year. While he did lose this year, he's still very good, and I think the Brewers could get a lot of value for any or all of these three pitchers. I think the main suitors would be the White Sox, Astros, Mariners, Angels, Rangers, Cardinals, and Dodgers. The Twins are another team that is on the decline. They were in first place for a while, and they bought big at the deadline, and then they just crashed the plane once again. Ooh, I'm going to do that way too much today. I already know. The Twins are just really good at choking and wasting players' talents like Byron Buxton. Max Kepler is my player, and he just wasn't that great hitting in 2022, but I'm sure he will do better outside of Minnesota. Some teams that I think might want to acquire Kepler are the Orioles, White Sox, Mariners, Angels, Phillies, Cardinals, and Rockies. This next team is the Mets, and I'm not sure if he'll get traded this offseason, but there's definitely been a lot of... And back to Editor Connor, and welcome back. I'm Editor Connor again. Dominic Smith, who was the player for the Mets, has also been non-tendered. We will move on to the Yankees. The Yankees don't really need Aaron Hicks, but I do think they will trade him. There's no point in keeping him anymore. Hicks just cannot hit anymore. He hits some home runs, but he's just not that good. Hicks is on the older side of 30, and he has switched to corner outfield from center field while he is aging. The Yankees aren't going to get much of anything in return because Hicks isn't good and he has a decently sized contract. I do think there will be some teams that need outfield depth that will try to get Hicks this offseason. I think those teams would include the Blue Jays, Twins, Angels, Rangers, Phillies, and Rockies. The next player is going to be traded 100 million, billion, quadrillion %. The Athletics are hot garbage, and Sean Murphy is pretty much all they have left. Murphy is going to garner some huge value from teams that need a catcher, and I say he's for sure going to get traded because the Athletics literally guaranteed he's going to get traded. He can hit at a very high level for a catcher. Murphy would get the A's stockpile of prospects even better, and they already have Shea Langeliers at catcher. Murphy can also play pretty good defensively from catcher, and there's a lot of teams that would want Murphy. Murphy is also on the younger side with a few more years of team service time. The Athletics would hang on to him and build around him, but he's also been shopped around a ton by the Athletics this and last offseason. I think some teams that would want Murphy are the Tigers, Astros, Mets, and mainly, sadly, the Cardinals. This next player just got traded at this year's deadline, but his new team in the Phillies really don't need him. Edmundo Sosa can play pretty good defense, but let's be honest, who really cares about defense? Sosa can't hit very well, but I think he can get some decent value in a trade for his defense, which is still boring. Sosa can really play good defense on the left side of the infield at short or third. I do think that some teams will be interested in the utility skill more rather than his hitter skill, because there really isn't that much hitter skill there. Oh my God, what was that? I think some of the teams that would want the utility man are the Yankees, Rays, Guardians, Mariners, Brewers, and Giants. The next player is one of the best players on the offseason trade market. There's several times that Brian Reynolds has been shopped around this offseason, and this is definitely one of them. Reynolds is a top outfielder in the game, and there's definitely a lot of teams that are going to want him. Reynolds provides a really well-hitting switch hitter. This only adds more value to him as he is never in a bad matchup. Reynolds has nice speed, and he has a good amount of triples each year in a spacey Pirates stadium. I think the Pirates will be able to get at least one top 100 prospect for him, and maybe even two. Center field has become a scarce position in recent years, and Reynolds has been one of the few best ones. I think a lot of the teams would want him, but the main teams are the Yankees, Blue Jays, Guardians, Astros, Mets, Phillies, Blue Jays, and Dodgers, and Padres. Just imagine. Remember when Aaron Hicks was a top 10 center fielder? Next up is Padres center fielder Trent Grisham. Grisham has done a great job of raising his trade stock this postseason. He got traded to the Padres from the Brewers after choking the playoffs for the Brewers. Grisham was looking like he would blossom into a top 10 center fielder, but he has proven that very wrong in 2022. Grisham hit very, very bad, although he did have a very successful postseason for San Diego. I think the Padres can get decent value for Grisham as he's still pretty young and he could easily come back from his poor season. He's a pretty decent bat in a lineup that is very lefty-heavy, though. Cough, cough, Blue Jays. I think there will be a decent market for Grisham. I think some teams that would be interested are the Yankees, Red Sox, Guardians, White Sox, Twins, Astros, Phillies, Cubs, and Giants, and as we mentioned earlier, if you didn't get it, the Blue Jays. The next player is Giants player, and I'm going to make this one shorter because there's only one team that he should go to. The player is Mike Yastrzemski, and the team is the Red Sox. Yastrzemski was one of the older rookies in 2019, and he isn't even that good anymore. I think he would be a match made in heaven if Yastrzemski just went to the Red Sox. His grandpa, Carl Yastrzemski, played for the Red Sox, and he was one of the better players in Red Sox history. I think that it would be an absolute perfect thing if Yastrzemski went to the Red Sox. Next up is Jesse Winker, and Winker has been in heavy trade talks after being traded just last year. Winker came to the Mariners after an all-star season and an injured season with the Reds, and he was terrible. The Mariners just traded for Teoscar Hernandez, and they really don't even need Jesse Winker anymore, and I think they can get some pretty decent value for Winker, and he has a big upside. The Mariners also just traded away star reliever Eric Swanson, so adding some bullpen help for Winker could be really good. He has the potential for a 30-double, 30-homer season, even though after his very down season with the M's. I think some landing spots for Winker could be the Orioles, White Sox, and Rockies. The next player would actually get some decent value on the trade market. He was mentioned in a possible Juan Soto deal that did never happen, thank God. Dylan Carlson isn't really the best player ever, but he still has decent value for the Cardinals. Carlson is pretty young, and he can play a pretty good center field. He can't hit the ball that well, though. He does bring a switch hitting value, which does help his case, even though his hitting ability still isn't that good. The Cardinals just signed Oscar Mercado, and this could be a replacement for Carlson. Or even just a bench bat. I'm not totally sure, but maybe. He was exactly average at the plate last year, but his play is carried by his defense. I think teams that could pursue Carlson are the Rays, Guardians, White Sox, Astros, Rangers, Phillies, Brewers, and Giants. The next player is very confusing to me in the fact that he was used in a very weird way last year. First of all, the Cubs traded for Harold Ramirez last offseason, and before he even played a game, they decided to trade him to the Rays. The Rays started to do Rays things, which are pretty much just completely random things that somehow work. They said to themselves, we need outfielders. We just traded for outfielder Harold Ramirez. Hey, where is he going to play, coach? First base. First base, but we need first base. Yeah, they've made some interesting decisions, so now I think they'll trade away Ramirez after bad defense. Who could have thought? At first base. Maybe stick a player at position who they've never played before wasn't a good idea. Maybe. Teams that could go for Ramirez are the Blue Jays, White Sox, Angels, and Pirates. I did not mean the Pirates, I said the Padres. I never said the Pirates. The next player is mainly a guess, but I don't think that the Rangers really need him. The player for the Rangers is Eli White. Like last offseason, I expect the Rangers to really try to make some moves this offseason. I don't really think that after these moves, the Rangers are planning Eli White in their long-term plan. He really only has good defense and really good speed, which is going to boost the stock pretty much all the way. White isn't the best, but he's pretty much Terrence Gore, but he can field and kind of hit better than, Terrence Gore. But he was still well below average while making some insane catches and home run robberies while stealing 12 bases for the Rangers. I think that White could get some attention from some teams, but not be valued too much. I think those teams for the Eli White could be the Guardians, Marlins, Cardinals, and Diamondbacks. Next up, we have Kevin Biggio. The Blue Jays are looking for a right fielder currently, and a good way to get a player not named Cody Bellinger is through trade. It is very hard to trade away Kevin Biggio for the Blue Jays. If you remember in 2019, the trio of Vlad Jr., Bo Bichette, and Kevin Biggio were all called up that year, and they were all sons of former players, even though they didn't play for the Blue Jays in their careers. And not just players, but perennial all-stars. Bichette and Guerrero have been very successful, but not so much Biggio, as he does not see the field nearly as much as he once did. I could see Biggio getting some good value for the Jays, as he is still younger and he has the potential to be pretty good. I think some teams interested could be the Red Sox, Twins, Angels, Rangers, Phillies, Cubs, and Diamondbacks. I hate to end such a good video this way, but my last player is yet another shot in the dark. The Nationals are another team because they aren't that good, meaning they would trade away their good players. The problem is, there is no good players anymore. Nobody is going to want, and I mean nobody is going to want Steven Strasburg. He has an absolutely gigantic contract, and he's also pretty garbage with a ton of injuries now. So I went with one of their players that is kind of okay in Tanner Rainey. Rainey can throw some heat, and as long as he isn't crushed, which he is a decent amount, I think there could be some teams interested in a reliever that he just throws really fast for a bad team. I don't think he'll cost much, but I think he could be a good bullpen ad for multiple teams, and I think those teams are the Rays, Red Sox, Twins, Mariners, Phillies, and Brewers. I hope you enjoyed my players that could be traded. I'll have more off-season content coming out soon. I love you all. Like, sub, share. Check out Patreon. Goodbye.